The second story, where Redditor found out that his father is not biological parent after taking a DNA test. I'd always read posts like this, but never thought I would be writing one myself at 35 years old. I'm sharing my story in hopes of connecting with others who might understand what I'm going through. If you do read this all, please know that I experienced a lot of denial at the beginning of this process. As someone who believes in science and data, it's painful to realize how hard I fought against accepting the truth. If you knew right away in a similar situation, please know I just wasn't capable of that, at least not initially. I was doing the best I could. Just over a week ago, on Halloween night, I was about to go to sleep at around 2 a.m. when I got an email that my AncestryDNA results were ready. Eager to see the results, I decided to take a quick look. I was excited because this was a project I had been working on with my father. When his mother, my closest grandparent, passed a few years ago, we were happy to bond over carrying on her genealogy research to discover and explore our extended family tree. But, upon opening the regions page, I was immediately confused. 3 of my grandparents, now all deceased, had strong Ashkenazi backgrounds, which has always been a huge part of my identity. While my living family is not strictly religious, we have always been very connected ethnically and culturally to our Judaism. But when I looked at my results, they showed that I was only 34% Ashkenazi, a stark difference from my brother's 80% from when he took the test a few years ago. I convinced myself that maybe he'd inherited the maximum amount of those genetics while I received the minimum. Regions appeared that I had never heard my family speak of, and I had never seen in any of my research: French, Basque, Finnish. I dismissed this as well, recalling posts I have seen about people's DNA results shifting after recent Ancestry platform updates. Then I moved to regions by parent, and I saw that all my Ashkenazi ancestry came from parent 1, while all these unexpected regions were from parent 2. I felt a pang of panic but quickly assigned parent 1 to my father, who had 2 Ashkenazi parents, and parent 2 to my mother, who had 1 Ashkenazi parent. I kept reassuring myself that this was just an extreme genetic distribution and nothing more. Then I opened the DNA matches section and saw my brother listed. This was no surprise to me, as I knew he had taken a test years ago, but then I saw that he was listed as my half-brother. I quickly changed the label to full brother, ignoring pop-up warnings encouraging against it. As I kept looking, I noticed 2 other people below my brother who appeared as my maternal grandparents, but their names were not those of the grandparents I grew up with my whole life. They were my grandparents' best friends, my sort of pseudo-grandparents growing up. I gasped and clung to the idea that my mother had been adopted by her parents and that both families had stayed close through it all. After sitting with this for a few hours, I called my dad. Even though he and my mom had been divorced for 15 years, and I never made it a habit to involve them in each other's affairs, I just needed reassurance, and I've always called my dad when I needed help. When I asked if he knew whether my mom had been adopted, he laughed, assuring me she wasn't. I took him through what I'd found, leaving out details I thought were irrelevant. My dad was quiet as I explained, but he patiently walked me through my theory. The more we talked, the more inconsistencies we uncovered, and I grew increasingly frustrated. Then, to my shock, my dad suggested that he might be questioning his paternity to me. I laughed it off, even grew angry with him, trying to steer the conversation back to my mom's adoption. But while he looked up his own 23andMe results, I went back to my DNA matches section to find my closest relative on my paternal side. I clicked into family trees, expecting to see familiar names. And they were familiar, just not paternally. The tree showed my mother's relatives, her tree. It hit me then. I had misassigned my parents. Parent 1 was my mother, and parent 2 was my father. With the correct assignments, my biological grandparents shifted to my paternal side. As I was confirming this for my father, he protested, telling me this still didn't line up 100% because my brother had shown up as fully related to me. I then confessed that I had changed my brother's relation to me, thinking it was a mistake at first. When I reverted my brother's status to its default, it read, half-brother, maternal side only, and at that moment, after 2 hours of frustration, I finally broke down. The man who'd been my father all my life, and my closest family, were not biologically related to me. By 5 a.m., I was beyond exhausted, ashamed for clinging so desperately to denial. My dad told me he'd known from the first result I'd shared that he likely wasn't my biological father, not because he ever suspected it, but because he trusted the science. He said the hardest part of finding out with me was watching me struggle so hard to rewrite the truth. The next 24 hours, sleepless and emotionally raw, were filled with some of the most heart-wrenching conversations of my life. My mother shared with me that, early in her marriage to my father, she had a very brief affair. It was only one time. She believed she'd taken all precautions, and, with no reason to suspect otherwise, she put that chapter behind her. She went on to have 3 children, all resembling my father, and there was never a hint of doubt from anyone in our family. If not for this test, this hidden piece of our history would have remained forever unknown. This past week has been extremely challenging, and the first few days were damn near paralyzing. But I'm choosing to approach this journey with forgiveness and understanding, hoping to find some positive takeaway from it all. My father and I agreed that, although unexpected, learning this truth together over the phone was perhaps the best way it could have unfolded. Our bond is unshaken, and we both know this revelation doesn't change anything between us. As for my relationship with my mom, we haven't always been very close, but over the last 7 years, we've grown to understand each other in ways I never thought possible. She married at 20 and had me at 21, navigating a difficult past and a very limited opportunity to explore her identity before starting a family. As our bond deepened over the years, I often found myself wishing I could go back in time, befriend my younger mother, and show her another life. One similar to the one I am currently living and loving, largely thanks to her. I understand that she made a mistake at a young age, but nothing in me feels anger towards her. I realize that in many ways, I'm luckier than most in this situation. I have a supportive family, my siblings included, who have been incredibly reassuring and are fully behind whatever decision I make about reaching out to my biological father. I've connected with an NPE, non-paternal event, therapist, and my first session is this Tuesday. I've also ordered a few books written by others who've been through similar experiences, hoping they offer some guidance. My friends have rallied around me, and their support has been a huge comfort. Sharing this here feels like an important part of processing everything, a way to connect with a community who can truly relate. I know there are still many choices ahead, deciding whether to reach out to my biological father, figuring out what to say if I do, and finding a way to rekindle my joy for exploring my ancestry. I want to get to a place where I can carry on my grandmother's legacy, learning to appreciate each branch of my family tree, even if my connection to each one is now so different. Thank you for giving me a space to share my story. Update 1. I want to thank everyone who read and commented on my last post. The past 4 months have been an absolute whirlwind, and so much has happened. I promised a few of you an update, so here it is. Since Halloween of last year, I've been very intentional about my NP journey. In November, I started seeing a therapist who specializes in NP experiences, and she's been incredible. I feel incredibly fortunate. Not only did I find a therapist who's a great fit for me, but she has also been through the exact same experience I had back in 2018. She's helped me navigate both the emotional impact and the logistical aspects of my discovery. As for reaching out to my biological father, I ultimately had my mom deliver the news to him and gauge his reaction. For context, I actually grew up around my biological father and half-siblings without knowing our connection. None of us did. His parents, my biological grandparents, were best friends with my grandparents, my mom's parents, and he and my mom grew up together. Though he wasn't technically a stranger, we hadn't spoken in years. When my mom told him the truth, he was completely shocked but also happy and immediately expressed a strong desire to talk, on my terms. A few days later, I called him and explained how I discovered the truth. We caught up a bit, but mostly, he cried and expressed deep shame for what had happened, particularly what he had done to my dad. He told me he wanted to speak with my dad to make amends. And he did. My bio-dad reached out, and they had a few conversations. He expressed his regret and reassured my dad that he would never and could never replace him. Despite the pain, my dad has shown an incredible amount of grace and has been open to having a relationship with my bio-dad. It's not entirely surprising, given that they were actually friends long ago, before and during my parents' marriage. Though they hadn't spoken in years, they were never truly strangers. I've made it clear to both of them that whatever relationship they choose to have is entirely up to them. Their journey of forgiveness is separate from mine, and I support whatever path they take. After Christmas, I saw my bio-dad in person. While home for the holidays, they drove a few hours to come see me and my mother. The reunion was a bit last minute, but I knew they were eager, and I realized that dragging it out would only make me more anxious. My dad initially struggled with the timing, felt it was happening fast, but I reassured him that this was the right decision for me and my own healing. I didn't want to drag out that milestone, and I wanted to be able to get the meeting out of the way to answer any questions, get info on my actual health history, and set some boundaries. Eventually, my dad understood and supported me, and even talked about seeing them all as well to talk through similar things. The reunion itself was surreal. I saw my bio-dad, his wife, whom he met long after I was conceived, my two half-siblings, and my bio-grandparents. Though I had known them as a teenager, the dynamic was, understandably, different. They all cried, hugged me, and expressed how happy they were to have me in their lives. We ate, drank, and tried to keep things as natural as possible. We even went out to dinner and toasted to everyone's strength in handling this news. The last toast was to my dad, which completely choked me up. I cried when they left. One thing that came up when I shared my regional DNA results is that my bio-dad got confirmation that his grandpa was not his father's father. Their family had been speculating for a while that there was a DNA discrepancy, and my results just proved it and allowed my bio-dad to tell his dad that his father was not biologically related to him. That's a whole other story that has come undone because of my discovery. Since the visit, my bio-dad and I have spoken a few times, but everything has been very low pressure. After such an emotional and intense November and December, we all felt the need to settle into our new reality. The start of the year has been about finding normalcy again, and it's been refreshing to deal with everyday life while continuing to work through things with my therapist. The world is only getting weirder and weirder as time passes, and I'm trying to keep my discovery in perspective, to see it as a blip in my experience that makes me interesting and challenges me to rethink my understanding of connection, relationships, and family. With the continuous support of my friends and family, I don't think it needs to be anything more than that right now. Moving forward, I want to wait until the summertime to start digging back into my Ancestry account. My goal is to continue to help my father build out his tree, even if my DNA won't be an asset there. I will keep working on my mother's tree, and I have agreed to be open to helping my bio-dad do more research on his family, since he doesn't know who his real grandfather is. I want to find ways to relate to all three trees, even if they all feel different to me. In the meantime, I will work to gather health history and other info from my living bio family so that I can give my real health history for the first time to my doctors. Update 2. It seems that quite a few men have found this post in the last 24 hours and are making the same types of comments, suggesting that my process has been selfish, that I don't care about my father's feelings, and also insulting me and my mother. Insisting that I should be making her pay for her mistake, and that I'm a horrible daughter for not doing so, a stark contrast to the comments this post garnered in the last 5 months. I'm not sure what MRA sub y'all came from, but I am not interested in people coming onto the thread to be uneducated and insulting. I can assure everyone that I have spent hundreds of hours over the last handful of months talking to each member of my family, especially my father, ensuring they are okay, processing together, and going to therapy myself. Just because I am not posting the ins and outs of what's going on in my father's mind or our most intimate conversations doesn't mean I don't care and nothing is happening. I will say that no one on this thread knows the full history of my parents' relationship or marriage. From what I do know, both of my parents have made big mistakes in their time together, and they both have regrets, not limited to their relationship starting with infidelity by my mom, ending with infidelity by my dad, and neither of them being honest about it. No one wins here, no one is innocent, and I don't care to have this be a competition where people insist I, or anyone else, dole out punishment. From the start, I made it very clear to all adults involved that I am not a pawn in my parents' relationships or their issues. I am an autonomous person. My dad is processing what my mother did, and they have had their convos dealing with it. But he also made it very clear that it's not my responsibility to mediate, and that he does not want to focus on enacting consequences and making people pay, or having me do it on his behalf. He insists all of this on his own. I can't tell anyone here how they would deal with this, but if you have an issue with our process not including concepts of payback or revenge, you need to do some serious work on yourself. Time for second story. Let's hear it. My younger brother's girlfriend said something that made me, and everyone else in the room, super uncomfortable. So, some background. My brother, we'll call him John, and I are very different people and always have been. I'm a nerdy guy who like playing Dungeons and Dragons and works from home coding websites. He's always been sporty and has one of those corporate office jobs where I swear half of his work is just playing golf and going to fancy lunches. We didn't always get along, but we're pretty good these days. He started dating his girlfriend, who we'll call Jane, A few years back during what was a pretty low point for me in life. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship that had ended anything but amicably, was burning out of the career I went to college for, and in general was about 2 paychecks away from having to move in with my folks. The stress of it all was taking a toll on my body. I went from the lightly chubby I'd been my whole life to just straight up fat, and shortly after the breakup I had an anxiety attack so bad it put me in the hospital. It was not a good time to get to know me. I was basically the picture of a fuck-up older brother. But I turned it around. I got the mental health assistance I needed to diagnose and treat some long-standing issues. With that as a springboard, I started exercising more and eating better, finding cooking to be a good hobby that also led to me eating less takeout and processed foods. I'm still no Adonis, still got a bit of a tummy, but I'm much stronger and feel better. I was able to quit my job and find a new one in a field that I never considered, but that I found I loved enough that I'm going back to school to work on a PhD in the fall so I can pursue it to a greater extent. And finally, I started dating again. Someone, we'll call her Flo, who was a better match for me than my ex. Which all brings us to the night things went wrong. We have a family gathering at my parents' house, extended family and all plus Jane and Flo. I'm making dinner, a beef Wellington. Everyone is raving about my food. I also did dinner this past Thanksgiving as well, and also my recent glow-up, my new job, the program I got into, etc. I'm smiling politely and mostly just trying to do a bunch of dinner prep while they won't get out of my way. Then Jane says, "Yeah, never thought I'd pick the wrong brother, but I'm starting to think I might have." You could hear a pin drop. I said nothing, again, just awkwardly laughed at what I assumed to have been a bad joke. Jane's face immediately changed to the look of someone who has only just realized their fuck-up. John looked pissed, and the two of them left the kitchen shortly after. From what I could see, she seemed to be trying to apologize to him while he looked really hurt. My relatives said nothing, not immediately anyway. Flo kind of just winced, and later told me that it was really awkward having to stand there, but she didn't know what else to do that wouldn't have escalated things or put me on the spot. That was over 2 months ago, and both John and Jane avoid me like the plague. Not even a text since then. Whenever I meet up with my relatives, they badmouth her over it. And while I think Jane did fuck up saying that, I really do think she was just making a bad joke. Personally, I think they're overreacting. This aside, I think she's probably the first person he's ever dated who was a fit for him in terms of personality and lifestyle. The only person being normal about it is Flo, who thinks it was weird, but like me, just a dumb thing to say, no jealousy. She knows Jane ain't my type. How do I clear the air with Jane and John and get people to stop bringing this up? I'm sick of hearing about it, and just want things to go back to how they were before. Right now it just feels like a dark cloud over all of our interactions. Update. Message John. Jane is a very nice person and she really cares for John. She's been with him through some difficult times, including a period where work separated the two of them for 3 months, and they're otherwise attached at the hip. She does have what some call a lack of filter. We've known that for a while. But she'd absolutely never leave him for me. For why my relatives won't let it go, probably because they're a bunch of old Italian Catholics who like to gossip. Which, incidentally, is probably why they didn't like the joke in the first place. My brother and I have a pretty good relationship as adults and aren't especially competitive. My folks and relatives don't favor one of us over the other, though admittedly they do understand my brother's career path better than mine. I agree with a number of comments that the impetus of the joke was that I'm a good cook, especially when it comes to be celebratory feasts. John is okay in the kitchen, but he's the kind of guy for whom a fancy meal just means picking up a more expensive cut of steak. I really don't think it has anything to do with me being the hot brother now, as a few comments suggested. John and I have always looked very different. Comparing us would be more a matter of personal preference than any kind of objective hotness scale. He's tall with a runner's build, and I'm a few inches shorter with a wide build and more visible muscles, as weightlifting is my main form of exercise. Lastly, not to toot my own horn, but I've never had any issues getting dates barring the aforementioned year-long period where my life was falling apart, so I must have been doing something right. Lastly, as some have said, I probably could have saved everyone some awkwardness by playing along with Jane's comment with a "sorry, Flo got to me first," or something else similar. I go into what Flo dramatically calls the kitchen death drive, while cooking complicated meals, where I'm laser-focused on the task at hand to the exclusion of all else, and my responses to questions tend to be short, curt, and even a bit rude. Normally, I would have tried to help salvage the bad joke, but I was searing a big expensive piece of tenderloin at the moment, so my thoughts were elsewhere. Update post. Met up with John at a sports bar we go to sometimes when our dad is in town. Shot the shit for a little bit before I asked him if everything was cool. He didn't really know what I was talking about at first. I had to remind him, that weird thing at the family dinner, and he immediately knew what I was talking about. I asked if we were all right, if they were all right, and lastly what we should do about our nosy Catholic relatives gossiping about all this shit. First off, he confirmed what I, and most of y'all, thought was true. Jane was talking about my cooking exclusively. She's a big fan. It's actually the reason she came to that gathering in the first place. So that's good to hear. Nothing to do with my physique, though John did congratulate me on the additional weight I'd lost since the whole ordeal. Second, John's issue with Jane's joke had nothing to do with the idea of her leaving him for me, or that he'd lost some prestige as the athlete in our family, or anything like that. Something I didn't mention in the original post because I didn't think it was important is that John and I grew up middle class while Jane's family is loaded. Not billionaires, but she graduated from an Ivy League college with no student loans, which she's turned into a well-paying and highly specialized tech job. She and John go on lots of vacations together, have a very nice apartment in a very expensive part of the city, all that stuff. The thing is, while John does pretty well for himself at work, he's not making nearly as much as she is and doesn't have old family money to fall back on. Trying to keep up with her has been putting a significant dent in his savings. Apparently, he's been psyching himself up to talk to her about how they may need to make some lifestyle adjustments so he can put more money away in savings and was worried how that might go. Hearing her say that I might be a better option after hearing about my new, to his mind, high-earning PhD program was the sort of thing that came at exactly the wrong time, so he had to walk away. I did have a little laugh at that. This PhD will open a lot of doors for me, but it's definitely not going to make me millionaire. Adding to the sting of that, while he and I don't have much of a rivalry, he does still have some insecurity about me being the smart one of the two of us. I say this with all the love in my heart. John is an extremely intelligent guy, but you'd never know that from just talking to him. He's always with numbers and knows more about corporate finance than nearly anyone I've ever met at any age. He also speaks with the vocabulary and goofy demeanor of a frat boy. So on top of the anxiety about his rich girlfriend thinking he's too broke to hang out, he was a little frustrated about the idea of a doctorate putting more perceived distance between us. He apologized for that jealousy. I told him it was fine, and if folks were giving him shit he could tell them he wasn't going to look over their stock portfolios anymore. He also said that he and Jane spoke about the money and she took it very well. The reason he hadn't been in touch lately was because they'd been looking for a more affordable apartment to move to when their lease is up. The only thing that left was how to handle the extended family. Apparently John didn't know they were still on about that, largely because whenever he and Jane see them they just talk about how Flo has too many piercings and swears too much. That gossip was news to me, so we mutually said, FKM, and decided to continue not really letting what they say about our partners get to us. Instead, we agreed to spend more time just the four of us. And, before we left for the night, John did ask me for a few of my recipes. What you think about this story? Write in the comment your opinion. On my channel you can watch other revenge or cheating stories. See you soon, my dear viewer.